So the Rohingya have faced persecution dating back to the beginning of the country. Then specifically in the 60s and 70s, the military regime of Ne Win targeted the Rohingya along with other Indian, along with Indian and Chinese nationals living in the country. The military essentially forced out hundreds of thousands of ethnic minorities and religious minorities like the Rohingya, even if their families had been in the country for multiple generations. This happened again in the 90s, actually, and the Rohingya were slowly repatriated. So they've really been the targets of generations of reprisals from the military. And because of that, the narrative within the country has really revolved around othering and making them marginalized and perceived by the majority of Burma and Myanmar people as foreigners. Even if, like I said, some of these Rohingya, most of them had been living in the country dating back to times before the country's independence. So there's no evidence to me that the Rohingya were foreigners or a foreign element. Rather, I think it was a very skillful manipulation of the media and nationalist sentiment by the military to cultivate this view that the Rohingya were not Burmese because they were not Buddhist. And that's really key. The fact that in Burma, identity is tied to religion. So the country really sees itself as a Buddhist one. And if you're not part of that Buddhist majority, you're perceived as a dangerous sort of other, an element in society that doesn't quite fit in. But more specifically, leading up to 2017, there was an isolated attack by a group calling itself the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which doesn't represent the Rohingya. There was some funding from Pakistan, sort of vague leadership structure, but essentially it's organized on the margins and has some activity in the refugee camps in Bangladesh, where it has perhaps a sliver of support. But this group attacked a couple police border guard stations in Rakhine, and the military essentially said, look, we have this massive terrorist problem and we're going to treat it like our 9/11. So they organized brutal, sweeping counterinsurgency campaigns, a complete overreaction to a very marginal and isolated incident, and in effect went to war against this enormous population of Rohingya living in southern Rakhine state, which had been persecuted for generations and really had no part in any designs to fight against the military or police or launch terror attacks. Some people will say that Aung San Suu Kyi has always been anti-Rohingya or anti-Muslim, a strong Buddhist nationalist, or xenophobic or racist even. Not knowing as much about her early story and character, I would say that it was a political calculation to maintain popularity and also to sort of prevent the military from outflanking her by playing a nationalist card, saying she wasn't doing enough to defend the country against attacks by non-Buddhists, which occasionally the military would try to drive this point. And their proxy party, the USDP, would campaign on this point, essentially to say that, look, the NLD is not doing enough to take care of Buddhists and they're letting in Muslims, et cetera, et cetera. Most of this was completely bogus. But Aung San Suu Kyi, in order to retain the enormous popularity among the Burma Buddhist majority that she retained, she probably felt that the best way to do that was to show, I'm a hardcore Buddhist nationalist and I will do whatever it takes to defend the military against these charges that they committed war crimes and genocide against the Rohingya. And it's unclear whether she had any sympathy for those affected by the military's violence, the Rohingya. But if she did, she was willing to put that aside to take the military's position, defend them in The Hague, and really ended up playing a puppet role for the military in this regard, because she shouldered all of the international condemnation. She had her own scholarships and diplomas and various awards around the world revoked because she was now seen as the face defending the military against crimes against humanity. And people around the world thought, how could this human rights icon, this democracy hero of Burma's revolution against military rule, be capable of now siding with the military and defending crimes against humanity? Well, I think it played to her advantage domestically. Her party and Aung San Suu Kyi in particular kept huge political support, and I think she probably made the choice for those reasons of domestic political calculation.